AngularJS provides built-in directives to handle all the HTML5 validation attributes, attributes like required and pattern, as well as input types like number and email. I'm not going to cover those in detail in this course because there's at least a half dozen other videos that cover them, but I do want to throw in a quick custom directive because it is easy and also uses a new approach as of Angular 1.3, and we're using 1.3 here. Let's say, as an example, that we want our username input to start with a specific character. This can be as easy as coming into the input for username and adding an attribute, which will be a directive, starts with, and let's say I want the username, it has to start with a capital S. Now I can use this attribute anywhere I want once I write the directive to implement this attribute. And that's one of the advantages of putting some validation logic into custom directives. That validation logic becomes reusable. Now I already have a startswith.js file. It's included in the shell page. And inside of here, I'm going to use module.directive to register a new custom directive, startswith. And this will return our directive definition object. Since I expect this to be used as a validation attribute, I'm going to restrict this directive to being just an attribute. And because I need to do validation against a model value, I'm going to require, again, the ng model controller. And that means I can write a linking function that takes scope, element, attributes, and the ng model controller. And one of the first things I'll need to do is discover what is the value of this attribute. Is it an A, is it a B, is it a C? And that's easy enough to dig out of the attributes. So I will ask for attributes.startswith. And now the way to write a custom validator is to walk up to the ng model controller and go to the validators property and add a new method to that object that matches the name of your validation attribute. So ngModel.$validators.startswith is a function, and because this is registered as a validator, Angular will automatically pass in the model value to me every time the validation rule needs to be applied. And inside of here, I can simply check, do I have a value, and does model value sub 0, so the first character, if it's not equal to that value, I will return false. Otherwise, return true. And that's all you need to do for a simple, straightforward synchronous validation. Just return true or false. You can grab parameters from other attributes that are on that DOM element, and then just add your function to $validators. The other thing you'll probably want to do if you're using ng messages is to add an error message that is associated with this validation rule. So I can say ng message for startswith, and I have to come up with a somewhat generic error message here since I don't know exactly what the parameter is. I'll say invalid starting character. And what would probably be useful for that input is if I have some additional help text that only appears when there is an error that describes to the user the constraints that are on that particular input. So you might tell the user that it has to start with an S. Well, let's give this a try. I've saved everything. Let me refresh. And of course, the first error that's going to come up is that this field is required. Now, if I start with a capital T, I now see that error message invalid starting character, lowercase s, same thing, uppercase s. That works. And that's just how quick and easy a custom validation rule can be. But what if you need to do something a little more complicated, something that requires server-side logic, for instance, making sure this username is unique? That's when you can write an asynchronous validator and make calls back to your server to determine if the given input is good or bad. Let's look at that next.